everyone. Welcome to Switchblade Sisters Social Club, the true crime podcast where two friends exploit their worst fears for your entertainment.
You're welcome.
I'm Dee, a writer and podcaster.
And I'm Isla from Criminally Good Books, a true crime and crime fiction bookshop in York.
Follow us on all the socials.
Except for X, obviously.
Or have a look at our website, switchbladesisterssocialclub.com.
Check them out for all our latest episodes, events, deals, and other weird stuff.
Listeners' discretion advised. Hi!
Hi, Chiquita Banana.
Chiquita Banana. I'm nervous about this one.
I'm nervous for you.
You know why? It's because it's a case I always said I would never cover because there's so many episodes on it already, and I just felt like I didn't have anything particularly new to contribute. It's not of my era, of my location, etc., etc. So I'm doing something that I always thought I would never do, and that is the Black Dahlia case. But it's because we do have something new to contribute this time, that we will be doing a two-parter. Part one, I will be telling you, surprise, surprise, the Black Dahlia case. And then part two, next week, we will have an interview with Steve Hodel, who is the son of Dr. George Hodel, one of the most convincing suspects of the Black Dahlia case. He's written a book, Black Dahlia Avenger, which was amazing. Basically, he's now retired, but he was a homicide LAPD detective, which must be one of the hardest jobs ever. Homicide in LA. And in trying to prove his dad's innocence once and for all, he started getting suspicious of his dad and now thinks that his dad was, in fact, not just the Black Dahlia, but then he went on to write follow-up books where he's convinced his dad was involved in several other crimes. And that is a common theory, that whoever's responsible for the Black Dahlia case must be responsible for others. It's too grim and graphic a murder
to be a one-off.
Exactly. It's like the person must have escalated from somewhere, carried on doing something. You know what I mean? It's just, to be a one-off crime is unlikely.
And we should probably say to listeners that this is the first time that I know what the episode's about, because usually we do it in I don't have a clue, you don't have a clue what I'm covering. But because this is such a big one, I know about what you're going to cover, but I don't know in detail because you've done a lot of research on this one.
I put it in the same category as JonBenet Ramsey in that it's probably because it's unsolved. It captures people's imaginations. It's quite often, for a lot of people, their gateway case into true crime, which is another reason why I was nervous about covering it. You know, the closest we got to covering it in the past, we had an Adam from Graveline Tours come and do an interview with us, me and my sister. And he is the one that you basically do tours around LA in funeral limos, and he takes you to a bunch of sites, and Black Dahlia obviously features heavily on that because it's an LA case. And there are so many podcasts that do it so well. And one of them was a podcast that I reviewed for Pod Bible once upon a time called The Root of Evil, the true story of the Hodel family and the Black Dahlia. I really recommend it because I am not going to be going into nearly as much detail of the whole family, but it's an 8-part podcast and it's hosted by Dr. George Hodel's great-granddaughters, Rasha and Yvette, and it explores the impact that Dr. George Hodel had on his whole family, because whether or not he was Black Dahlia, he was a horrendous human being. That is the family that Steve Hodel comes from and has managed to overcome, let's say, the obstacles that presented. And so we'll be talking to him next week. But in this episode, I'm going to be giving you a rundown of the Black Dahlia case. Many of us know of it, heard of it, have listened to other podcasts about it, but this episode I will be reminding people or telling you for the first time, but also as it's a precursor to the Steve interview, I will talk about a lot of the other suspects, but focusing on Dr. George Hodel. One of the reasons why it's captured the imagination of so many is because the murder itself was so grim at a time when it was set in the backdrop of Hollywood's golden era, and it's unsolved, which we hate, right? And this is the story of Elizabeth Short, who was a single girl living in LA And she was casually dating people, including a guy called Robert Red Manley, who was a 25-year-old married man. On the 9th of January, 1947, he had gone out with her, left her at the hotel lobby, and she was never seen again alive. Because on the 15th of January, so almost a week later, a mum was out with her kid and found the body in Leimart Park. I'm going to talk about the injuries because it does matter, but she was nude. She'd been bisected at the waist, completely drained of blood. Her body had been washed and she'd been mutilated and carefully posed. There was little blood on the scene, so it was quite clear that she had been murdered elsewhere and brought there. She had a Glasgow smile. It's when you are cut across the mouth to extend your smile. She had flesh removed from her thigh and from her breast, and her intestines had been kind of rearranged beneath her pelvis. It had been determined that she had been dead for 10 hours before discovery. So she was killed sort of overnight on the 14th or 15th of January. So she was likely held for a period of time. That is critical because it means that she would have been held somewhere where she wouldn't have been found or heard or whatever. So it has to be someone who's got access to such a location. A heel print was found nearby. Tire tracks were also found. A cement sack containing watered down blood was also found. So probably used, I'm imagining a large, like construction-y type bag that was probably used to transport the body there. An autopsy was performed the next day on the 16th of January, 1947. So the woman was 5'5", let's say kind of averagey height for a woman, 52 kilos, so very slight. She had blue eyes and brown hair. She had ligature marks on her ankles, wrists, and neck. And she had loads of lacerations all over her body. The bisection had probably occurred after death and was quite expertly done. So the thought was that it was someone with medical training or perhaps a butcher. It was also done, I read in some sources, in a way that was only taught at medical universities at a specific time period.
Wow.
If that makes sense. Before they introduced a new way of bisecting people. Don't ask me why you need to know how to bisect a human, but anyways, they thought at a time that they could narrow down how old the person might be.
Yeah.
Exactly, at least what year they'd trained. And the victim was identified very quickly through fingerprints because in 1943, so about 4 years earlier, she had been arrested, Elizabeth Short, for a minor crime, underage drinking. So very minor crime.
Yeah.
Shouldn't even be counted as a crime.
But back then, I'm sure it was a lot worse than it would be now.
I don't know. But in any case, it's quite fortunate it happened because it meant that she had her fingerprints on file, right? And they could identify her quicker. I'm going to share her mugshot because not only is it fabulous, but I want you to see what she looks like.
This is the picture that everyone knows. And I think that not only is the case so famous for the reasons that you've kind of touched on and that you will go into, I think it's also because she is a very striking person. And unfortunately, we know that if you are striking, your picture's used more, press use you more, there's books all over the place with her picture on them, which has kept the case kind of alive a bit more.
So Santa Barbara Police, that's where she used to live. It's her mugshots, so it's side and front, and she's very striking. She would have been under 21 in this photo. She definitely looks more worldly.
Because this is the mugshot for the underage drinking, is it?
Yeah, I mean, she might be drunk in these photos, yes. And you can see that she's also got that intriguing look about her as well. She's not all-American blonde girl next door hot. And she was very popular, Lots of people were interested in dating her, and it's not a surprise. So they identify her, and this breaks my heart, but when they identified her, reporters from the Los Angeles Examiner called Elizabeth's mother Phoebe and pretended Elizabeth had won a beauty contest and plied loads of information from her. Then told her, oh, actually, your daughter was brutally murdered. That's how her mother found out.
Unreal, isn't it? Unreal. Scumbags, absolute scumbags. I cannot imagine that, like the feeling of, oh my God, my daughter's won something, to then someone just saying, oh, by the way, I lied. She's not won anything, just to let you know she's dead.
I don't don't know why they even, if you're going to be a dick and do this, why would you tell her she's dead? Like, why not just hang up the phone and let someone else tell her with experience? Do you know what I mean? Like,
maybe they felt bad and felt like they had to tell her. I mean,
it's
I
a
don't
dick
know.
move anyways, but
Mm.
it's like your ruse has worked and you've got information. Do you want to not tell her in this way? Anyway, I mean, it's just awful. The whole thing is awful. Yeah. And then they offered to pay for the mum's airfare to LA so she could help with the investigation. But when she got to LA, they actively kept her away from the police and anyone, to protect their story. The media gave Elizabeth a nickname, the Black Dahlia, saying she prowled Hollywood Boulevard and that she was an adventuress, which is victim
It's
blaming at the
funny.
best.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny how if it was a guy, be a very different situation. Women who go and have a good time, like meet guys, casually date. Like even now people still have a problem with it. But back then in the 40s, I could imagine it would be a far bigger problem.
Exactly. It seems predatory, dodgy, sneaky, when really she's just like bar hopping with her mates. Anyway, so I want to talk a bit about Elizabeth Short. So she was born on the 29th of July, 1924, in Boston, where I used to live. Not in 1924, though. She was one of five daughters. Her father built mini golf courses, but when the stock market crashed in 1929, his car was found abandoned near a river, and it was assumed that he took his life by jumping into the river.
Oh no.
So sad. So Elizabeth's mum started to work to support the family. Bear in mind, she was left with five
Five
daughters.
daughters.
And Elizabeth had lung issues. She even had to have surgery at 15. A doctor recommended that she goes to warmer climates. So her mum sent her to go live with family friends in Miami, in Florida, which obviously is much warmer throughout the year. And she went to school there until she dropped out when she was around 17. In 1942, Elizabeth's mum got a letter from her supposedly dead husband. He had actually faked his death and moved to California.
This woman. This poor woman.
I can't.
Sorry, how many years? So I don't know how old she was when he faked his own death, but it's a good few years, and he's just let her suffer on her own, bringing up these girls.
1929 until 1942, so 13 years.
No,
Five girls. He left behind his wife and kids without any support in the 20s, 30s.
Don't tell me he wants something now.
No, not immediately. I get that he must have been under enormous financial pressure and stress and whatever.
Did he have lots of debts and owed people money? Is that part of it?
All I could see was that it was after the stock market crashed. I'm guessing it got pretty bad for him to fake his own death, right? Or for people to think that he killed himself. It must have been really hard. I don't for a minute think he walked away without any sense of guilt or remorse or whatever. But to then pop up 13 years later, it's like, did it really take you that long to get yourself sorted? I don't know. It's just like...
Can you imagine if someone was arrested and they couldn't get word to their family for a few days or like something like that, but 13 years of like, okay, so what has gone on, Dee? Tell me.
Not entirely sure, but he's living in California, which, as we know, is also very nice, warm climate. And so Elizabeth went to live with him, even though she had not seen him since she was 6. So she's now a teenager. Surprise, surprise, he was a shit dad. So she left him soon after. She left in January 1943, and she went to go work on an army base. She had a boyfriend who was an Air Force sergeant who, sadly, it was reported, had abused her. So then she moved to Santa Barbara, where she was arrested, and she meant to move back to Massachusetts because one of the conditions of her release, I guess, was that she moved back to her mother's house. I'm guessing because she was done for underage drinking. They were like, you need to go back to your guardian and be looked after. But instead, she went to Florida. She met another Air Force officer. He was deployed to Asia. He wrote a letter to her and proposed to her. He had basically got into a plane crash and he was recovering from his injuries when he wrote her this letter and proposed to her. But then before he returned home, he died in another plane crash.
Oh, God.
Like,
so sad.
Poor guy, poor Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm. And she got the letter, presumably, with the proposal.
Yeah. So then it would have been followed soon after by some sort of notification that her now fiance has died in another plane crash. So at this point, she moves to LA. Like, I get from her story, her independence jumps out of the page, you know?
I mean, it kind of has to, her circumstances. Like, even like her mum wanted her to go to Miami for very good reasons for her health, but you can see that she's kind of on her own. She doesn't have her mum there and stuff. And
Yeah, but she's got like spark and sass, doesn't she? And like, if you read this story now, it seems like it could happen today, like this woman moving around the country or whatever. But then you have to remember that this was in the 40s. So this woman was moving around at a time where women didn't have it as easy to be independent, and it would have been frowned upon. She would have been called a prowler, you know, because she's a single woman living on her own, far away from her family. But yeah, so I just like read about her and I can't help but like her. And I would love to go prowling the nightclubs with girls like this. So she worked as a waitress and she was renting a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. So she wasn't actually, this is where language matters, she wasn't prowling Hollywood Boulevard. She was living on Hollywood Boulevard.
she's just going out for her shopping.
It's bonkers, isn't it? So on the 9th of January, 1947, Elizabeth returned to LA after a shopping trip to San Diego with her 25-year-old married salesman boyfriend, Robert Red Manley. So he actually dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown LA in the afternoon. There's some reports of her using the telephone in the lobby, because not only is this pre-mobile phone time, it's also pre most people having phones in the house. Like, you know, in the 40s, if you were renting a room, you might not have a phone. You may not. It wouldn't have been that weird not to. Anyway, so she makes a phone call in the lobby, and she was possibly seen at the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge, 600 meters away from the Biltmore. And then, like I said, on the 24th of January, she was found bisected, brutally tortured, clearly been held for a few days. And what happened was a media frenzy, as you can imagine. They never ascertained whether these were hoaxes or not. But, for example, soon after the body was found, a person called the office of the LA Examiner and spoke to James Richardson, the reporter, claiming to be the killer and congratulating the newspaper. Remember, the one that like plied all the info out of the mum by pretending she'd won a beauty contest. So the supposed killer on the phone congratulated the newspaper on their coverage. And he said he planned on turning himself in, but wanted the police to chase him a bit longer, and told the reporter to expect souvenirs in the post of Elizabeth Short. Just sickening.
Oh, God.
But they actually got a letter in the post, which included her birth certificate, business cards, photographs, names written on pieces of paper, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover. All of these things had been cleaned with gasoline in a way very similar to how her body was cleaned. But they found some fingerprints, which they sent to the FBI. But surprise, surprise, the fingerprints were compromised in transit, so could not be tested. This is one of those cases, and we will be discussing this with Steve Hodel in our next episode, where it's like, is it police incompetence or is it police corruption? It's really hard to tell sometimes because they hide corruption in, they pretend that it's incompetence when it is sometimes on purpose, huh?
There's also lots of new tests that can be done now. I don't know if that's anything that can be done in this case, but there's certainly new tests that can be done on fragments of things. And, but that's just so sad, isn't it?
That's one of the questions I want to ask Steve is, if this case happened today, what would be the process for the investigation?
And also, if the fingerprint was compromised, I wonder if the killer, whoever they are, had planted a fingerprint. So it might not even have revealed anything about them. It might have been something entirely different.
Exactly. One thing that's probably true is that the person that killed Elizabeth Short was clever and understood a lot about forensics at the time because of the cleaning of the body with gasoline. That was to remove fingerprints, DNA, et cetera, which it seems so obvious to us now in this day and age, but in the 40s people didn't know about this stuff as much,
Like, I wonder if they had army training as well. Like, I'm fascinated. Repulsed and fascinated.
The day that the LA Examiner got that package with a bunch of random gumph, a handbag and a black shoe was also found in a garbage can in an alley 2 miles from where the body was found. It was thought to be Elizabeth Short's, and it was also wiped down with gasoline, which ruins fingerprints, but again, cleaned in the same way as the stuff that arrived in the post. And it wasn't something that had been released to the public, that the Black Dahlia killer cleans things with gasoline, for example. So 150 men were suspected and supposedly cleared. 750 police officers were put on the case. $10,000 was posted as a reward, which is about $150,000 today.
Sorry, who put the reward up?
I'm not actually sure. I think it's the police department, but it led to loads of false confessions and false leads. And then obviously there's the handwritten letter to the LA Examiner, which said that he was going to turn himself in. And he even gave a location to where he was going to turn himself in. So the police were waiting at this location at the time specified. No one appeared. And then later there was another letter sent to the Examiner saying that he changed his mind.
Sorry, I slept in, didn't make it.
Yeah, couldn't be bothered. So the case went cold. The police blamed the media for compromising the investigation, and the journalists blamed the police for their incompetencies and potentially a cover-up.
I mean, to be honest, I agree with both of those sentiments.
They both happened. So I wanted to look at the suspects. The main suspects, I should say, because like I said, 150 people were cleared. There's a handful of people that were like seriously considered, and people still seriously consider them. So Mark Hansen. Who was Mark Hansen, the owner of the address book sent by the supposed killer in the parcel with the documents. Now, it's unlikely. The guy writing the letters was saying he was the killer and he was going to turn himself in. And then he posted Mark Hansen's address book. Was that him confessing? Was that him framing Mark Hansen? I don't know. But let me tell you who Mark Hansen is, because there is a link with Elizabeth Short. He was a nightclub and theater owner, and he was an acquaintance of Elizabeth Short. Her roommate, so Elizabeth Short had a roommate, said that Mark had been making advances to her, which she had been rejected. But apparently this guy, Mark Hansen, had been cleared. I don't know how. I don't have anything about what cleared him, but he was cleared. Robert Red Manley was also cleared. This is the married guy that she had been out with that day. Obviously has a motive. He's having an affair with her. Was she potentially threatening to come out with it?
I mean, if you threat to kill someone in the way that she was killed, to me, seems more than she was threatening to say something about the affair. I mean, that is proper premeditation and a lot of thought gone into something.
And overkill. Do you know what I mean? It's not a crime of passion. That's why I find it hard to believe it's a one-off. It's not like a fit of fury and you unleash. You know what I mean? It was methodical. It would have taken a long time. He held her for a while, you know, like all of these things. He drained her of her blood. This is not just a crime of passion, like a fit of rage. This is someone enjoying this process. But also, I want to say, this guy, Robert Red Manley, he was cleared using a polygraph. And we all know how reliable they are.
So I still say he's in the frame.
Lots of people do. A 1940s polygraph is not enough to convince me. I hope that there was more as well. There was a man called Martin Lewis, who was another acquaintance of hers, who was also cleared. There was a guy called Leslie Dillon, who is one that, like, very many people think is a prime suspect. He was a bellhop and former mortician's assistant, which is an interesting career path, but also a mortician's assistant would have some medical knowledge. Also, not saying this makes you a killer at all, but would be more comfortable than your average person in rounds of death. Anyways, there was a theory, one of the theories, because as you can imagine, there's loads, that somehow Elizabeth Short found out too much about his and some police officers' scheme for robbing hotels.
This is the bellhop.
Yeah, him and some police officers had a scheme. Presumably, he's the man on the inside in the hotels. He's literally the bellhop moving the luggage or whatever, and can be like, hey, these people have
money and jewels and stuff.
You know, exactly, fancy whatever.
I'm sure it happens.
I mean, I could totally imagine 1940s LAPD cops having like informants working in the hotels and the cafes and whatever. A bellhop is perfect, moves around seamlessly, you know, without drawing any attention to himself between all of the different floors and rooms of a hotel. He's like a perfect little spy. But the theory here is saying that they were using him as an informant for corrupt behavior, robbing the hotels, rather than give us a heads up if any crimes are happening in the hotels. It's give us a heads up so we can commit some crimes in the hotels. So that's a theory, that she had somehow found out about this. And so they killed her. And that very nicely explains away why the police lost fingerprints and this, that, and the other, because it was their interest to just make this murder go away. Who knows? But like I said, there's books written about him as a suspect.
What's his surname again?
Leslie Dillon. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone. I think that person, Leslie Dillon's child, has also written a book, like Steve Hodel, about how their dad's potentially one of the strongest suspects.
Love a good murder? Come visit me, Isla, at Crimley Good Books in York, your one-stop shop for crime fiction and true crime reads, as well as gifts and author events. Or browse online at crimleygoodbooks.co.uk.
I want to show you now, because I told you I was going to focus mainly in this episode on Dr. George Hodel. Not just because we're interviewing his son and because he's a prime suspect, but because I genuinely think, from what I've read and listened to and watched, I genuinely think the strongest case is against him. And again, not in law enforcement or anything. I'm going to show you a picture of him at the time, Dr. George Hodel. Okay. He lived well into his 90s. He didn't look like this at the end, but look, a dashing man.
He's wearing a suit, tie.
He's got a mustache. He's
handkerchief in there. Well-groomed.
It's a black and white photo, but he looks like he's got quite dark features, like dark hair. He's got like thick eyebrows, thick bushy mustache, but like well-trimmed. He looks charismatic.
He kind of looks like a jazz musician, or like he would work in a club or something. But he's a doctor.
He's a doctor, but he definitely looks like a doctor to the stars, which is what he was. The reason why I say he looks like charismatic or whatever is because I think it goes a long way to explain his influence and his impact and what he managed to get away with. And, after his death, his son, like I said, Steve, he wanted to prove his dad's innocence. He was probably really freaking annoyed, especially as a police officer, having this black cloud, this shadow over him his entire life. Don't get me wrong. He never for a minute was defending his father as a person in general. He was right off the bat like, yes, my dad did some awful things, but he's not the Black Dahlia murderer. So he's trying to prove his dad's innocence because his mother, Steve's mother, was telling people that George, his father, was a killer and that he had abused her. His sister had already come out and said there was abuse in the family. In researching and trying to prove that his father was not the Black Dahlia killer, he found stuff that has led him to believe that actually he probably is the Black Dahlia murderer.
Can I ask, did Steve's mom, when she said that he's a murderer, is that because of the Black Dahlia case, or was there something else?
He was suspected of killing his secretary before that, a lady called Ruth Spalding, and he was also acquitted of raping his daughter. I
did not know that.
Yeah. So again, like I said, Steve was not saying that he wasn't responsible for those things. He wasn't trying to say my dad is like an angel. He was just trying to clear him of the Black Dahlia murders. He eventually, very soon after the Black Dahlia murders, fled to live in the Philippines, not before they had wiretapped his phones, supposedly in 1949, and got this from the recording. I'm going to read to you. Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary.
You just sound so confident.
Yeah. So there was lots of suspects over the years, including Orson Welles, Woody Guthrie,
interesting,
Bugsy Siegel, but George Hodel one just seems like the most obvious. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail about George Hodel. He was a Los Angeles physician. He was born in 1907 and who by the 1940s occupied a sort of unique position socially in the medical world, but also the sort of boho world and the artsy world. So he was friends with a lot of the stars, a lot of the artists, and treated them. He had always been academically gifted. He trained in medicine in California, and he was active in venereal disease and public health work, as it would have been called at the time, which we now call STIs.
So was he a gynecologist, or was it more just like sexual health?
Sexual health, let's say, which means he would be a very trusted doctor, because that is something, especially in the 40s, that He would have seen and heard a lot of things that people definitely didn't want out. He hung out with people like Man Ray. There's a whole bunch of theories about whether Man Ray wasn't involved with the murders, but I told you the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short had the Glasgow smile. There's a lot of Man Ray paintings that seem to like allude to that. So was that inspiration for the Black Dahlia smile or vice versa? I don't know whether that's a stretch, but it was true that Man Ray hung out a lot at the house. I get the feeling that the house was a bit of a party house. And the house was the John Sowden house on Franklin Avenue. And George Hodel lived there from 1945 to 1950. And I am going to show you a picture of the house because it is a bit bonkers.
See, he's obviously a wealthy, like a well-off guy because of his status.
And also, remember we said he had the Black Dahlia killer had to have a location to be able to hold her for a significant period of time. So could that have been this house? Steve, his son, argues that it could have. It is also known as the Jaws house, not because it was in Jaws, which was my first thought. So first to say it's got like a tropical garden in the front, like literally looks like a rainforest that's covering much of the house. It looks like a flat roofed, like I don't know how many stories, but it looks like it could be a flat roof bungalow. But then in the middle, it's got a huge window with smaller panes of glass, like divided up by cast iron. And then bricks forming like a mouth around this window.
Yeah, it's like a futuristic mouth.
And I've just noticed something. I need to zoom in. Is this like a suit of armor just posed outside like a statue?
Yeah, it's a statue with a sword outside.
I mean, if you're not watching the video, which you can, by the way, watch our video of this on Spotify or YouTube, do Google the house. It is quite spectacular. So John Sowden was a painter and photographer, and he hired his friend Lloyd Wright, who's the eldest son of Frank Lloyd Wright, to design his house. George Hodel bought the house, like I said, in 1945, and he came under scrutiny. He wasn't originally suspected, but in 1949, there was a widely publicized case in which his teenage daughter, Tamer, accused him of sexual abuse. I think she was 13 at the time. I remember this again from the Root of Evil podcast that I mentioned at the beginning. It's her descendants, her daughter, and I think her granddaughters who go into that a bit more. And it seems like I said, it was a bit of a party house, but like a twisted party house where the young girls received unwanted attention, not just from George, but also from guests and so forth.
Oh, God. Like an Epstein house.
He was acquitted, so not cleared, but it was dropped because of either lack of evidence or mistrial or something. But the trial put him on the radar of investigators reviewing sex crimes and medical suspects in the Dahlia case. So they're clearly like, who's committed a sex crime, who has a medical background? And then George comes up. By 1950, the district attorney investigators had escalated matters enough to run electronic surveillance at his Franklin Avenue house. And the surveillance produced the most famous statement in the Hodel debate, which was that line that if he had killed the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. And then he left California in 1950. There's rumors, well, he moved to Hawaii, he moved to the Philippines, but then he returned to California in 1990, and he died in San Francisco in 1999 at age 91.
Wow, okay.
So in The Black Dahlia Avenger, which was produced in 2003, Steve Hodel argues that his father, George, killed Elizabeth Short and that the murder was clearly done by someone who is medically trained. He claims that George Hodel and Elizabeth Short were actually acquainted, and he refers to photographs. And these photos are disputed because he claims that Elizabeth Short is in the photos. A lot of people, and bear in mind, these photos would have been from the 40s. They would have been aged. They would have been not great quality, et cetera, et cetera. Even some of her family members are like not sure if it's her in the photos. And he argues that there was corruption that kept the case from being publicly resolved, which bear in mind, he's talking about corruption in the police force that he himself worked for. So this is a big statement for him, you know? He wrote another book called Most Evil, where he actually argues that George Hodel was a wider serial killer, basically, that he had killed others, which, again, I think it's totally believable that the Black Dahlia killer is responsible for other murders. He even says that there's an argument that George Hodel was the Zodiac Killer, which, is another serial killer in California around about the same time that gone unsolved. And he wrote, again, like the Black Dahlia Killer, wrote letters to the media with codes and so forth. The Black Dahlia Killer didn't really include codes as such, but, this act of writing to the media. And he wrote a Black Dahlia Avenger 2 and later installments that tried to connect George Hodel to other lone woman murders in LA. Unlike some of the theories of some of the suspects, George Hodel was a serious suspect of the police, so serious that they actually wiretapped his house. So it's not totally out there, Some of the people were not actively looked at by the police or had been cleared really quickly. The wiretap is super incriminating, but he could have been taunted by whoever he was speaking to.
Is that the only thing that came out, like that particular statement?
Yeah, really. Steve argues that his dad obviously had the medical background to perform the mutilations that were done on Elizabeth Short. Steve also talks a lot about the house, the Jaws house, that it is a plausible private location for his dad to have held Elizabeth Short for numerous days and performed this brutal murder. And then, of course, he also said that he had found these photos, but then also handwriting comparisons, because there was these notes written to the media, handwritten notes, which it was never proven if they were the Black Dahlia murderer who actually wrote the letters. It seemed like it because they seemed to know stuff that only the murderer would know. They cleaned the items in the same way. And Steve is saying that his dad's handwriting matches it. Some say that the comparison was too weak to sort of carry in court. And also, they've never confirmed that the person who wrote those letters was actually the Black Dahlia murderer. So what you at most would confirm is that he was writing sick, twisted letters to the police.
Yeah.
I
know. Just like that in itself is awful. So if he did that, he's a scumbag.
And then on top of that, his sort of quick departure to Asia, to Hawaii and so forth soon after. I mean, it wasn't that soon after, it was 5 years, but it was about a year after he was starting to be suspected. But you could easily argue, well, look, you guys were making my life hell. I'm innocent, so I left. It's kind of not he said, she said, but he's got some evidence, but you could easily explain it all away. But then altogether, it does feel very plausible. And then in the absence of any other better suspects, it's easy to be like, yeah, it must be this guy. This is the problem. Everyone's like, yeah, but maybe that was just because of this, So Elizabeth Short is interred at Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. No killer has ever been found. The press and the public have badly distorted Elizabeth's life, and family dramas and celebrity suspect theories have usually performed better as stories than the actual evidence or the actual true story about her. This is why I'm super excited about interviewing Steve, because what was it really like being at the heart of this case? This man grew up with this being his life. So my main source is a book. It is The Black Dahlia Avenger by Steve Hodel, available at criminallygoodbooks.co.uk. And I will list all other sources in the show notes. And then next week, come join us for the interview, the actual interview. Dun, dun, dun. This quiz is going to be a bit different. I'm going to tell you a celebrity and you tell me what crime they got arrested for.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. All righty then. Hugh Grant, 1995.
He was caught with Divine Brown, prostitute, sex worker, and his crime was hiring a prostitute, sex worker rather, sorry.
So it was lewd conduct, which was oral sex with a sex worker in a car. Destiny Brown, I think her name was.
Oh, okay. Can I just ask, was it okay that she was a sex worker? Was it just that he was caught outside in the car and it was like lewd conduct?
Yeah,
I think
lewd conduct to me implies that the problem is that it was public.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, because I think it was in like Vegas or something where I don't think that they have a problem with, because Nevada is where they have the brothels and everything. So I think that side of things is actually legal if you're in private. All right, number 2, Winona Ryder in 2001.
Shoplifting in a department store.
Grand theft, burglary, and vandalism. Winona Ryder was arrested for stealing roughly $5,000 worth of clothes from Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills. Despite the store's multiple requests to drop the charges, So basically, they didn't want to prosecute Winona Ryder. Plus, the district attorney's office refused to drop the charges, and Ryder was eventually convicted of grand theft and shoplifting. Ironically, the trial and Ryder's great outfits for its duration began a long-standing friendship between herself and Marc Jacobs, whose clothes she was convicted of stealing. She first appeared in his spring 2003 campaign, and they have remained friends and collaborators since.
Wow. I wonder if there's other celebrities that are like, right, I'm going to steal that.
I mean, have you ever heard a case more white privilege than that? Do you know what I mean?
Get me in there. I'll go and grab some Paul Smith jeans and see if anyone.
Yeah, I'm rich, but I'm going to shoplift anyways, and it's going to get me more money. Do you know what I mean? And get to go to like Paris Fashion Week as a result, or whatever.
Wow, I don't know. That's something else,
right? So, Martha Stewart, 2003.
It's either drug related or driving related. I'm going to go with drugs.
You think Martha Stewart took drugs? Maybe. Securities fraud, insider trading, obstruction of justice, and lying to investigators. Now, you know, securities frauds and all this, that, and the other. I do not understand it all. So let me just try to explain what I've got here. The story was that in 2003, it was alleged that Martha Stewart had engaged in insider trading with her stockbroker, Peter Bakanovic. Authorities have never been able to prove it, and the security fraud charges were dropped. But during the course of the investigation, Stewart had lied to federal authorities multiple times. She was eventually convicted of obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and making false statements, and spent 5 months in prison, 5 months on house arrest, and 2 years on probation. I don't think people realize here in the UK how big Martha Stewart is in the States as well. Like,
household name.
She's like Oprah level big.
Well, no one is Oprah level.
No one's big. Oprah. But you know what I mean? It's like you will struggle to find someone at the time anyways who didn't know who Martha Stewart was. Robert Downey Jr.?
I'm going to say that's drugs.
Possession of various drugs, including cocaine, heroin, and marijuana. So he has drug possession charges multiple times. He failed to appear for mandated drug tests, and he famously went into rehab and everything. He said, and if this is true, this is incredibly sad. He was exposed to drugs at a very early age because of his father's drug use, which I think is true. But he said that, sorry, I don't mean to sound like I don't believe him. It's just like, it's so shocking that I'm struggling to comprehend it, I think is the thing. Because he says the first time he did cocaine with his dad, already problematic. The first time he did cocaine with his dad, he was 8 years old.
No. Oh, no. That's awful.
Ugh. So, Justin Bieber.
I kind of feel that that's drunk driving. Or
DUI, resisting arrest and driving with an expired license. He was arrested in 2014 and failed a sobriety test. According to NBC News, Bieber was aggravated at the time of the arrest. He allegedly told the officer that he was 19 years old and was just out having a good time. What were you doing when you were 19? When the officer replied that he hadn't been driving around in a Lamborghini as a teen, Bieber allegedly said, "Yeah, well, I bet you didn't have millions of dollars in your bank account either."
Nice.
In a 2021 post, Bieber said that the arrest was not his finest hour. No shit.
At least he's admitting it, you know.
Oh, I do feel bad for people that have had to grow up in the public eye because you are an idiot as a teen.
Yeah, just try not to be a dick about it if you're arrested.
I've got so many good ones. I'm just going to
keep going. Right. I want to keep.
Paris Hilton.
Ooh, I think that must be drugs.
Yeah, not wrong. DUI, possession of marijuana and cocaine, obstructing an officer. So she was arrested in 2000. The first time she was arrested was in 2006 for driving under the influence. Her license was suspended, but she continued to drive because the law doesn't apply to them. And in 2010, Hilton pled guilty to the latter two charges following her arrest in Nevada after being found with marijuana and cocaine. She had pled guilty and was sentenced to community service, probation, and a fine.
Did she do those? Like, did she do the community service?
I remember it, and I think she did. But, you know, it's just like, don't get me wrong. I kind of feel like, depending on her age, that's an appropriate punishment for that. It's just not the kind of punishment that other people would get if they weren't Paris Hilton, you know? So her whole life wasn't ruined because of one stupid mistake or two stupid mistakes. In the same way that if she was a black
someone
teen,
else's,
you know?
Yeah.
Okay, Justin Timberlake.
Oh, I'm going to say financial.
Driving while intoxicated. He was pulled over and
Oh,
arrested
that was going to be my
after
next one.
running a stop sign and swerving. Okay, this one is quite funny.
Okay.
Not, but just in that it's so dated. Frank Sinatra.
Oh, okay. Getting in a fight.
He was charged with seduction. I know
You
that
know what? Oh,
seduction is
we
a
should be
crime.
charged. We should be charged with
I know.
seduction, do you
You looking
think?
like that, like a schnack. I charge you with looking tasty. So in 1938, Sinatra was arrested in New York and charged with seduction, a crime that's usually applied to a young man seducing an unmarried woman based on false promises, usually involving promises of marriage, and thereby ruining her
Wow.
reputation.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
So
Frank.
kind of
So
like romance
interesting.
scamming. However, the woman
Yeah.
with whom he'd slept with was already married. So the state then changed it to one of adultery because he'd been carrying on with a married woman, in quotes. And then the charge was later dropped entirely after Sinatra paid a $500 bond.
Which must have been quite a lot of money.
Yeah, but white privilege, and also, I mean, not that I'm think it's right cheating on your partners or whatever, but are you really using like courts and police time and money and resources?
For something like that, yeah. When there's killers out there.
Yeah, so if you think this law is archaic, though, think again, because up until November of 2024, adultery was still a crime in New York State. And again, I'm not saying adultery is right. It's not like other laws that I don't like, where I
Yeah.
just think they're wrong. It's that I
Yeah.
don't know whether this is the best use of our time. And they obviously agree because they've changed the law, or removed it. That it only happened in 2024 is bonkers, right?
Mm. So if you were, because I know that like you could obviously get a divorce if you can prove that your partner's been adulterous, or you can say that that's the grounds for divorce. But could you be arrested in like 2024 before then for committing adultery?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I doubt anyone was actually like prosecuting people for this. Do you know what I mean? I think it was just that no one had bothered taking the time and money to change a law because it's not simple to remove or change a law.
Can you imagine if you had like someone that you were married to that was like having an affair? I'd be like, yep, no, get like
I'd be
there
like,
in a
let's move to New
dumpster and
York.
yeah, straight away. Oh, how interesting.
So I tell you what, it sounds like the kind of law that they're trying to catch, like a serial killer or a mobster or a serial crime committer, and they need to hold him. So they're like, oh, let's get him on adultery. Let's keep him locked up for
Yes,
adultery until we can find
something
it.
small.
Yeah, like how they got Al Capone on tax charges or whatever,
Oh
right?
gosh, yeah, 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 yeah.
All right, ready?
Yep.
Tim Allen,
Oh, that's fraud.
drug trafficking.
Oh,
Yeah,
trafficking. Ooh,
drug trafficking
wow.
before his famous career. So,
Wow.
Tim Allen was arrested in October of 1978 at a Michigan airport after being found in possession of over a pound of cocaine in his luggage. I don't know much about cocaine trafficking, but a pound of it sounds quite a lot. Enough to be done for trafficking, right? So he pled guilty to drug trafficking charges and served over 2 years in prison.
Wow.
Nearly 20 years later, in 1997, he was arrested a second time, this time for a DUI, and he was put on 1 year probation. He went to rehab and remained sober ever since. Good for him. He's problematic in other ways, but, I don't wish addiction on him, obviously. Tiger Woods.
That was driving
Mhm.
offenses. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a recent one, well, like last week or like
Yeah.
quite recently.
2017, Tiger Woods was arrested and charged in Florida with driving under the influence of 5 drugs, including Xanax, Ambien, and marijuana. So all of them like zoning out drugs, you know?
Wow.
Charges were later dropped after he pled to a lesser charge of reckless driving. And again, that sounds like privilege to me because under the influence of 5 drugs.
And he's done it again. And then what was it? He called Donald Trump to speak to Donald Trump. Like, was it last week or the week
Yeah.
before when he was arrested? And they've got these videos and pictures of him, and he's just off his face.
I mean, he
It's
doesn't
just,
seem like a nice guy, allegedly.
no.
And when you compare it to other people who get arrested I don't know. I just think it's very telling what they get arrested for and how they react to it, because my final one is Bill Gates.
Okay, Bill Gates got arrested for smoking a joint at uni.
I mean, I'm not making light of this. This isn't good, but he ran a stop sign and he was driving without a license. So in 1977, an early 20s Bill Gates was arrested in Albuquerque, New Mexico, following a traffic stop. He says, they pulled me over. I didn't have my license. They put me in with all the drunks all night long.
All night long.
So catch us next week for our interview with Steve Hodel about his father, the potential Black Dahlia killer. Bonkers that we've got him on the show, isn't it?
Well done in getting him. I'm super, super keen to speak to him and super keen for everyone to hear this episode and the next one.
See you all later. Bye, sexy listeners.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye. Like this episode? Want more? Come visit me, Isla, at Crimley Good Books in the heart of York. We're an independent bookshop dedicated entirely to crime. From cosy mysteries to gritty thrillers, historical whodunits to juicy true crime. We've got signed editions, special gifts, and plenty of recommendations for your next obsession. We also host a bunch of awesome author events. Can't make it in person? Visit us online at crimleygoodbooks.co.uk.